So I had a lot of fun on a club call the other day. My club members, for those of you who aren't familiar with the Intentional Success Club, is a group coaching program. I've got over 2 dozen companies in that program. We meet together as individual groups once a month and have one-on-one calls with all of the members as needed. And it's fun because some of the questions that come up are just good old fashioned, easy for me anyway to tackle questions. So we had an operational question the other day, and you guys know I love talking about operations because to me, operations is the most solvable thing of the things that we do because it is so process and people driven. It's not heavily influenced by suppliers or customers as other parts of our company, certainly as selling is. So operations sometimes sounds a little bit easier to deal with. But it's also what I like about operations is that we've solved most of the problems because it's simply process. And the definition of process is this something that will evolve over time and you get better at it. So operations are always about the migration of good habits to better habits and the eschewing of the poor habits. So the question becomes, what's a bad habit? That's the wrong question, really. There's so many of them. What's the right question? Tom, we're missing stuff on show polls. Everybody's pointing fingers. How do other companies solve this? That's the perfect question, right? You're missing stuff on show polls. Tell me what that looks like. Well, and then they'll tell the anecdote and they'll tell the story about how something got missed. This guy loaded the truck himself and he pushed the cases around to get the right size cases and accidentally pushed a case that was supposed to go over into another pile and didn't notice that it didn't get on the truck. Classic example. Also, absolutely unacceptable and 100% preventable. These are just process things. So let's talk about that today. Let's talk about some easy to solve problems. But the alert is as much as you want operations to move faster, you need to get it to move slower. Listen. Welcome to your weekly dose of uncommon sense, helpful insights, and tough love. The Intentional Success Podcast comes to you through the generous support of Merch Crew. Merch Crew is the smart way to book quality AV freelancers and protect your business. Your choice, your rates. Merch Crew handles contracts, insurance, and payments so you save time, cut costs, and reduce risk. Start today at merchcrew.com. So how do you prevent mistakes in warehouse operations? You're prepping orders, you've got all these parts and pieces, you've got 120 line items out of your computer, which is probably 500 barcode SKUs, cases, cables, all sorts of things. It's thousands and thousands of pieces. And how do we get that right every time? Well, first thing you need to know is that you can get it right every time. And if you're not getting it right every time, it is on you. This is a solvable problem. No, really, there's no industry that's perfect, and we will never be perfect 100% of the time. But the expectation has to be that this will be perfect all the time. Tell me an industry where it's acceptable to repeatedly make mistakes and leave things off. I mean, do you go back to a restaurant that always makes a mistake on the entree or frequently makes a mistake on the entree and doesn't have the side that comes with it, right? You don't do that. The people in the kitchen are laser focused on making sure that every one of the 27 variations on the dinner for the evening, every one of those entrees, they know how to make and they will go out right every single time. And there's a huge number of checks and balances in doing that. And the last line of defense, of course, is always the waiter who's putting it on the table. So if something comes to your table incorrect at a good restaurant, then lots of people made a mistake in order for that to happen, which is why you don't see it that often, right? It happens from time to time when people go, oh, I apologize, and here's some extra fries for your table, or here's a free dessert. They solve it and everything moves on, but it doesn't happen that often. In our industry, when we're prepping shows, it happens all the time. Every once in a while, I check in and say, tell me, how often when you send an order from the warehouse, is it perfect? Not how often is it imperfect, how often is it perfect, where the crew calls, I got everything I need. I'm not looking for anything. All the cases were properly labeled. It all matches with what we were told was going to be sent. Life is good. How often does that happen? Okay. If it's not happening on every show, okay, you need to be working on that. If it happens occasionally, once in a while, please make sure that there's a human error that allowed that to happen and that there's not a process error in there. I'm much more forgiving of human errors because, well, we can't 100% manage humans and we're all going to have brain farts. But if process fails, if our process allows us to do something, I really get kind of riled up because we could have fixed that already. So in the preamble, I talked about a situation where the wrong stuff or something got missed or pushed aside and didn't make it onto the truck. We know we pulled it. We know it was scanned. We know it was packaged and labeled because that is the process. But for whatever reason, it didn't make it onto the truck. That, at first blush, may look to you like a human error, but to me, that is a process error because the humans didn't have enough processes. Therefore, this was allowed to happen. We were winging something. In our example, what was winging? What we were winging is the person who was going to deliver the order came in early, loaded the truck himself, had maybe 3 orders to go on the truck, and got something mixed up. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. But since we know it's going to happen, what could we have done to prevent it? Well, quick answer to this circumstance, and then we'll talk about how we can prevent this across many more circumstances, is letting somebody load a truck by themselves. Not a good policy. Have another set of eyes there because when you're prepping an order, you check off something when you pull it and put it in the area. You check it off again to complete the order and reserve or remove everything from availability of the inventory. But there's the third check where you have to check it when it goes onto the truck to make sure that it was actually sent or into the shipper or whoever it was. So there's a step in this company's process that was missing. So it wasn't human error yet. Okay. Well, there was a judgment error in management in thinking they didn't need this step in the process, which they now understand they do. And they're going to have to change the way they do some things to prevent a preventable error in the future, which is, one, it's really not fair to ask somebody to load a truck by themselves. And two, if you're going to do that, you should have made every effort to preload it, pre-separate it, pre-clear it so that it was easy as possible. Like versus why wasn't the truck loaded in the first place? Why did a person have to come in early to do that? We can figure all of those things out. The point is the process was broken. That third check off that says this one on the truck was not happening. So it's very easy for something to get rolled aside, get used as a table, get used as a chair, get used as wheels to push something across the warehouse. It's very easy for somebody to run out and open up a case and grab something really quick to solve an emergency and then not come back and replace it, fix it, correct it, or leave a note. Okay. Process will catch that error. Humans will continue to make errors, but process is designed to catch errors so that we can reduce the number of human errors that get past our oversight. So here we had an oversight problem. Well, now we get into the fun part because, well, wait a minute, that takes more time. Tom, we don't have time for that. We have to check. We have to scan everything again. I said, no, I didn't tell you to scan everything again. I didn't tell you to do 3 scans. I told you to do 3 checks. So once you've scanned everything and in your rental management system, you've got a manifest. You've got some sort of ability to build a carnet or a shipping list that says, here's everything that has shipped. Now I just need to make sure that the cases in that list make it onto the truck. It'd be nice to know that the right things are in the cases, but in the processes of pushing them onto the truck, I am checking the lids on the cases for the contents and checking off the content items for the things that got ganged or gang boxed together. So preventable problem. It doesn't take a lot of extra time, but it does take extra time. Trying to save that time is a mistake. It's the problem. If you want to save time in warehouse operations, do things in the correct order, but don't shortchange anything that takes time, care, oversight, review, prevention. And in show prep, all of those things apply. So we need to slow down our show prep. However, we also can speed it up by being ready to prep the show. And what do I mean by that? If you're trying to prep an order and you're having to go to a pile of equipment that is not QC'd, it's going to take longer to prep that order because now you have to stop, probably scan something in, go through the case, find the missing cables, go find that screw that everybody loses, put that thing back together so that you can put it onto the show that you're prepping. From an operations process standpoint, we've already had a human error in that we chose not to check in and QC and store all the things that had come back into the warehouse. Our number one priority in the warehouse is check in, not check out. We spend more time checking in, we spend more time doing quality control so that we can spend less time doing show prep. So we can complain about the process of show prep taking too long, but there are things that we can do to reduce the amount of time that show prep takes. And that starts with getting it in the right priority. Show prep is the last thing we do. We will stay late until it's done, but everything else has to happen first. We have to have everything checked in. Everything's got to be QC'd. Everything's got to be on the show. And show prep should be simply the gathering of things or acknowledging where they're coming from and putting it on the manifest so that we're ready to go. So in reality, if you have the correct operation, something as simple as doing that third checkoff when you load it onto the truck doesn't really add any time, because if you're operating correctly, you will compress the amount of time it takes to prep because all the things you do before prep have been done. So we complain about it takes longer to do things this way, and it will at first. You have to get your priorities straight. We're too busy. I know you're too busy. I've seen your warehouses that are often a mess. Oh, don't come into our warehouse. It's a mess. Well, why is it a mess? Well, we're so busy. Well, isn't all the gear out? Yes. Well, then your warehouse should be spotless. If all your gear's out, what is your team doing, right? Oh, well, we sent them on shows. Well, there's your problem, right? We misprioritized what happens in the warehouse. So if we think the priority of the warehouse is prepping, once we've prepped all the shows, we take all the warehouse techs and we send them out to show site so that they can be billable. And what we've done is we've left important work undone that will make the next prep easier. So yes, it takes longer, but you have to do things in the right priority, and it will reduce the amount of time it actually takes. You are too busy because your priorities are not in the right order. So you can reduce that sense of busyness by reprioritizing what you should be busy doing. And many people say, well, we really like doing one thing at a time. You know, Tom, you're saying that we'd have to stop prepping in the middle of prepping an order to have a truck come back in, receive that truck, check in all that equipment, QC all that equipment, put it back on the shelf, and then go back to prepping our order. And I'm going, yes. That's exactly what you're supposed to do. If you aren't big enough to have a dedicated team for check-in and a dedicated team doing show prep, this is what you're going to do. You're going to stop, you're going to shift gears, and you're going to get back to work. However, you're in operations. You know when every truck's coming back. You know when every order is going out. You know where every single piece of gear is. And you know how to schedule. So you know what things have to happen that day, and you know at the beginning of the day in your 10-minute stand-up meeting, and here are the projects that we're going to work on. We're going to spend the first 2 hours getting this order prepped. We're going to start with audio, and then we're going to do video. However, the truck from the Cisco show is coming in, and then we're going to have to stop what we're doing, unload that, check all that back in, QC everything, put it all up. We'll probably go to lunch after that, and then we'll come back and do the video and the lighting for that show. Right? We know what's going to happen, so we can plan our day around that. There should not be any really big surprises. Now, we always have show site pride. We have to run things out to show site. Well, how many things do you have to run out to show site because you didn't prep the order correctly or you missed something in the pull? Okay, if we're going to reduce that, okay, then that's going to happen less often. But if it's the by the ways that are often created by once we get on a show site, we find out what the client really wanted, or we didn't know that the hotel wasn't going to let us get into this room until later, or that this rigging point was non-functional, all of a sudden we need stuff from the shop. That is normal. So if you have a show loading in and you haven't scheduled somebody who's available to make the runs to show site for the by the ways and the add-ons, then you haven't done a good job of operationally planning your day, have you? So we know that sometime by 10 a.m. is an 8 a.m. load in. By 10 a.m. we're loading stuff in a van and sending Hector out there to deliver that stuff to the van. And then he'll come back and we'll get the next load ready for him, right? That's how it goes sometimes when you're doing in-town shows. So slowing down the most important thing that you do, which is show prep, is important in all of this so that it will be more accurate, it will get more eyes on it, and we can reduce the number of human errors that are involved. So having said that, I will say, I've talked about quality control. 99% of us have our equipment barcoded, whether we scan it out or not, doesn't really matter. Barcodes are a way to take inventory once or twice a year if that's what you need to do, but it's also a way to scan equipment in and out so that you know that you have prepped properly. It's not the only way to do it. And of course, there's RFID. So these RFID tags that send out radio frequencies, and you run them through a scanning portal that tells you what is in the case, which is another way of collecting barcodes and information about what you've prepped. All of these are tools for check-in and check-out. All of these things actually slow the process down, but they do remove some of the human error, but not all of the human error. So they're tools. So we need to use our tools correctly and use them the way that they are intended to be used. In other words, if we rely on barcodes to tell us what equipment is available because we scan things out, then scanning things onto a show prep order is mission critical. It's very important so that we don't accidentally put that on a different order and create a work problem or a workflow problem later. So having the tools is important. Knowing why they exist is important. Using them just for the sake of using them is not. So decide what your priority is. But at the end of the day, if every show prep goes out as clean as it can possibly go, it matches the manifest as perfectly as it can be, then we have more capacity to deal with the things that we can't control, which is really what planning is all about. So while I'm talking about operations, remember, this is in the planning sphere. We're always looking around the corner. We know what's coming down the pike. We know what their schedule yields. We know how many people we have available and how many more people we need to get. And we build our life in operations around that planning schedule so that we always have the team that we need, the people that we need, the talent that we need, and that little bit extra for the things that we know we can't control that we know are going to happen because we're smart that way. So there you go. Operations is easy if you get your processes right and reduce the human error. And human error is something that we celebrate because now we get to do employee development saying, hey, you're now worth more to me because you know how to make a very expensive mistake. Thanks for doing that. Don't do that again. Here's what happened and here's how we prevent it in the future. Thanks for playing. So there's my operational spiel today. Thanks for listening, everybody. Get out there and get those shows prepped properly. Thanks for listening. If this episode of the Intentional Success Podcast has made an impact on your day, then please leave a review and don't forget to like and subscribe. This podcast has been brought to you by the helpful folks at Merch Crew.